inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and share my new book. The origin of this book is, I've lived in the US for 40 years. I went there to do a PhD in physics and switched to computer science when computer science was hardly an established field at the time. Then I worked in the computer industry, then in the software industry, then switched to the telecom industry and got into corporate strategic planning, marketing, those kind of things. And then I became a management consultant to industry, advising on where the future is, what technologies, what markets and things of that sort. And had some large AT&T, British Telecom, these kind of clients and media clients. And that's before the internet existed. We were just trying to convince people that email is a valid way to replace telex. I remember we used to have those fights. And then I became an entrepreneur, started my own companies. And at one time I had my own companies I started in 20 countries. And then in '94, I decided that instead of going on doing the same thing forever, it's better to leave and reinvent myself, do something different. And I had no background in humanities, which is typical of Indians who are technocrats. We don't have humanities background because we specialize at a very young age. So I am self-taught in the humanities. I was very interested in philosophy. I wanted to understand the real philosophy of the quantum philosophy and Indian philosophy and see if there is a relationship there. And comparative religion, history, culture, these kind of things I started studying. And I looked at the biases and prejudice against Indian civilization as a result of my studies. My foundation would give grants. People are always very happy to take the money because it's good to have money. But then the work would always be with a certain tilt. And I feel anyone who's got a science technology kind of background can think logically, can think analytically. You can learn these things better than people who might have spent their whole career studying these things. And so for the last 20 years I spent all my time, and this is not a hobby, I do it full time, researching on matters of Indian civilization, Indian identity, Indian contributions to the world, past, present and future, and how India is situated in the world thinking, where is it unfair, where is it fair, and what can be done about it. So that's sort of the area. Now, one of the things I noticed is that because the West has a history of being very powerful in recent centuries, most of the discourse has been produced by the West or using Western paradigms. So it became, by default, it became universal. So the West's idea of history, the West's idea of philosophy became sort of the world standard. Everybody's taught in that way. So if you study philosophy in India, you learn Hegel and you learn these kind of Western thinkers. And so the Western experience and their way of looking at the world, their lens, has become universal. And this is now being challenged by China. Chinese claim that Confucian thought has its own Confucian ethics, Confucian modernity, and they contest the West's claim of being the sole approach to the modern world. There's also Islamic contest against Western claims. So I started wondering, is there an Indian challenge to that also? And that's where this book came about. The methodology I used is to observe the West as an Indian, because I lived there for 40 years. So even when I was in business, I was always making observations on how Westerners are different. You sometimes come across behavior that strikes you as unusual for an Indian to come across some behavior. Most Indians have had similar kind of experiences but might not have decided to study it formally, and decided I'll actually study it formally. So I would look at how they react to a situation and reach my own conclusions. And this method of reversing the gaze, which means they've been gazing at us, sending scholars, studying us for hundreds of years. The whole study of Indology by Europeans is a good example, and anthropology and all that, studying Indians in the Western frame of reference. Reversing it, so using the Indian frame of reference to study the West. This I felt is necessary, and we don't have enough people who do that. There are people called post-colonial scholars who do this, but they are using Western paradigms to study the West. They're really unfamiliar with, uneducated in Indian thought, and some of them actually hate it. So they are not really Indians studying the West, they just happen to have Indian skin, but they're really Western mindset studying the West. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who would be well versed in classical Indian philosophical systems and trying to look at the West on Indian terms. There's another group of people who understand Indian thought very well, but they are well read in Sanskrit and Indian classics and history and so forth. But such people are not well informed about the West. So they're not able to do the kind of project I'm doing, because to do this project you need to know both sides. If you're trying to do a comparative, you need to understand both sides. Then the other factor that I used is that when I went to the West, I was 20 years old, and started in a very junior capacity, so I couldn't raise my voice and be critical and all of those things. But I was always observant. And then when I became a corporate executive, I had thousands of people reporting to me, so I had to sort out their problems, their differences, their disputes, and I had to understand their mindset, their psychology, and so on. When I became a businessman, I had to negotiate with them, have problems with them, be partners with them. So understanding the Western mindset is very critical for you people, that as you grow up and face the world, live in the competitive world, you will find that things you take for granted are not necessarily the way everybody is. I mean, if you are in a deal with some Chinese people, they have a different way of thinking. If you are negotiating with some Japanese people, you must understand some cultural nuances. If you're dealing with French, they're different than if you're dealing with Americans. There are definitely civilizational differences. Now, in all these other countries I just named, the education system teaches them about their own sense of grand history and special way of looking at the world, what is different about them, their sense of identity, they're very proud of it. All kinds of Americans who are highly educated they've studied in school about the founding fathers. My kids went to schools to study about the founding fathers and their great past and whatnot. So they're well informed and very secure and very confident. I noticed that when Indians face a kind of civilizational encounter, they're not able to represent themselves. They're very shy, very embarrassed, some have a complex. They want to avoid the issue. So, in fact, my sense of identity inquiry started when I went to America, because the environment forced me to answer these questions. I never thought of these questions, but the environment forces you to answer the question. You can either undertake a study and figure out what to say, or you can just always live in a complex and hide from the problem and hide from the question and run away, which is seen as being a coward or being a weak person, because those civilizations are very assertive and very proud of their identity, and they give you a chance to explain your views, and you should know how to explain your views. So I did it out of necessity. I also did it because when I became owner of many companies, I had to understand that these guys are Polish people, they are different than these guys were Russian people, and these guys are Czech people, they are having a partition with Slovak people. Why are they partitioning Czechoslovakia into Czech and Slovak? Because I had companies there. And why the French are different from the Germans. So I had to understand their differences with each other, because I was doing business there. How Koreans feel about Japanese and how Japanese feel about Chinese. It was very important to understand all that. So I'll give you an example of my disappointment with Indians In 2005, the Crown Princess of Thailand wanted to do a World Sanskrit Conference. Now, if somebody wants to do a conference on French civilization, the French government will be so excited, love it, and help you. And if somebody wants to do a Mandarin, Chinese, classical studies, Chinese government will help you. But here, the Indian government, ironically at that time BJP government, did not want to help at all, just they had no interest. And the Crown Princess is very interested in Sanskrit, herself, student of Sanskrit, has a tutor, and her sons have come, she sent them to India to learn Sanskrit, and she wanted to start a college of Sanskrit, and they inaugurated a journal of Sanskrit in which I wrote the first paper, first article. And so a professor from Delhi University was sort of organizing this for the Thai royal family, and he called me in panic that no help is coming from Indian government. It's looking like a big embarrassment, that they think of India as their mother civilization, like the West thinks of Greece as the mother civilization. Many of these ASEAN countries think of India as the mother civilization, but this mother has no interest. It's like they are orphans who abandoned them, because I keep delaying, telling them, yeah, we'll get support, but the government is not supporting. And then he called me and said, why don't your foundation, you live in the US, but we'll make it look like Indian funding, and at least we'll save face. So I said, we are a tiny foundation, but I'll do what I can. So we sponsored, my foundation sponsored. And the Thai people and my foundation became the sponsors. So the whole program is set, and the inauguration, the Thai princess is there, I'm there, we're supposed to inaugurate. Just a few days before, there is a sudden desire on the part of HRD minister from India because they realize it's becoming a very successful thing. Somebody else has done all the hard work, but they want to hijack it. So suddenly I'm told that no, the Indian side will be represented by HRD minister, as if I am thrown out after doing all this work. So I protested, said, you can't do that, because we've been there organizing this thing for so long, and why should some politician come to take the limelight? The politician, of course, wants the limelight. So a compromise was reached that all three of us will be present. Thai people will be present, the HRD minister will be present, I'll be three-way coordination. So the conference went very well. And then there was a reception given dinner reception, cocktail reception given by the Indian embassy. Suddenly the Indian embassy realized that this is of value. They had no idea. This is value. So when the reception was going on, I was sitting with people from the embassy, young people, foreign service people. So I asked them, what is the Indian foreign policy on projecting its civilization as an asset? Soft power, the Americans call it soft power, which means you project your culture as something of value to others. And hard power means military and all that. Soft power is this kind of thing. So I said, projecting Indian civilization as soft power, as a foreign policy in ASEAN countries which think India is the mother civilization. In Indonesia, the language is called Bahasa. In Malaysia, it's called Bahasa, and so on. So these foreign service people were totally surprised at the question. I mean, they had no answer. They never thought of it. They said, we don't know. We don't have any policy like that. I said, why? He said, sir, because we're a secular country. So I said, what does secular have to do with civilization? And there's a demand for it, so you should supply it. You should set up Sanskrit colleges and colleges on Indian dance and Indian thought, and because these people want it. It will help you in your trade, it will help you in your technology, it will help you in doing business in these countries. Well, anyway, that's the kind of experience I've had with Indians being in denial mode and embarrassed and so on. So I started doing my own research on what is distinct about the Indian civilization. Another problem I found is our gurus. Rather than explaining what is distinct about their worldview, they like to get quick followers. And to get quick followers, they talk about how everything is same. There is no difference, everything is same. And because that way the other party is more comfortable, they can win more followers, get more money quickly. Whereas to explain what is distinct takes more time and more quality audience. But of course, then you'll have a quality audience rather than quantity audience. So gurus are also to blame. I blame them a lot in this for mapping and translating Indian ideas into Western frameworks, which create a distortion. So, one of the chapters in this book is on Sanskrit words that are non-translatable, that have no equivalent, and by translating you are actually diluting the meaning, and you are, just to try and make it easy for people to understand, you're distorting the meaning. What happens if everything about you gets translated to a Western equivalent is that you become redundant. You see? If every idea, every word, every thought, every technique, everything is replaced by a Western equivalent, then you belong in a museum. Your civilization has been digested. So I introduced the term digestion of one civilization into another. And the example I give is that if a tiger eats a deer, then there's no more deer left. The DNA of the deer is broken down into the smaller and smaller parts until there is no DNA left, and then these parts are reassembled into the tiger's DNA. So if Indian civilization gets digested into the West, what you have is a stronger West. There's no Indian civilization left. And if you don't believe this, you look at what happened to the pagans of Europe. They're gone, and their civilization, a lot of their ideas have become part of Christianity, like the Christmas tree, like the Easter. These are all pagan rituals and customs and symbols. They become part of their Christianity now. Similarly, the Native Americans, so much was taken and digested out of them, but the Native Americans themselves perished. So civilizations have died. It is not that civilizations are there forever. So unless we are clear what is distinct about us, and we are able to explain it, and we are able to be very confident in explaining it, and we resist being digested as part of the West, we will get digested. So the question then comes, what's wrong with it? Suppose you all become Western digested, what's wrong with it? What's wrong with it is you'll never be first class, you'll always be second class. In the terms of being Western, as the paradigm, as the universalism, you will never control what the reference points are. You will never be the authority. The authorities on Western thought are Westerners. The authority on their paradigm. It's like if China were to take over the world. The way I explain this to Americans who want to understand why I'm concerned is I tell them this, that suppose someday in the future China is the dominant country in the world, and because they're dominant country, they've started spreading Mandarin language everywhere, and they own much of the world media. They buy off all the major American media, and Chinese people running it, and they start schools, and they start teaching American people Mandarin, and the great Chinese thinkers, and Chinese philosophy. And so within 50 years or 100 years, 2-3 generations are raised on the Chinese paradigm, and people are all clamoring to look Chinese and behave Chinese in order to get jobs. And the matrimonial ads are saying, I'm partly Chinese, because maybe you'll be considered a little superior that way. So suppose Americans become colonized like that, then what's wrong is that you will never be at par with the actual Chinese. You will always be below them, because you will never be as Chinese as the Chinese are. And you lost your sense of your bearings, your foundations, turn it over to somebody else, and they'll always control, they'll always dominate. So Americans understand that it is legitimate for an Indian to feel this way. Getting digested is a second class. You're secured as your place is the glass ceiling, and you're secured as a second class person. Now, with this, I've written the book, and what I just told you is like chapter 1, why the book is written. The rest of the book is each chapter pointing out one area of difference, which is very sharp difference. The image on the cover of the book is what's called Samudra Manthan, which is the Devas and Asuras struggling to churn the ocean and produce creativity. And that's how opposites can be in mutual tension, can also be in cooperation. So in the back are the Asuras and in the front are the Devas. So that's sort of the metaphor used for this book. And the idea here is to not say we are superior, but we're not inferior, we're just different. That's what it is. So there are 4 or 5 major chapters, each describing in detail one particular kind of difference. And the purpose is to create a sense of identity using those differences which are not easily digested, given away, unless you distort them. If you preserve the authenticity of these qualities, they will remain distinct and you can create a sense of identity. Now, this Samudra Manthan, or struggle with an opposite person, back and forth, working back and forth, journeying. I've done this for informally for 40 years, but very explicitly and systematically for the last 20 years. I've done it with Christian who are Catholic theologians, Protestants, secular Americans, scientific atheists. I've done it with Indians who are atheists and Marxists. I've done it with different schools of Hinduism, Vaishnavites, ISKCON people, Sri Aurobindo people. I've done it with Buddhists. So I've done it with a wide range of people, this kind of manthan, my own manthan or journey to produce this book. Now, the problem is as follows. Those of you who are into solving simultaneous equations and optimization, I'll put it in that way. The problem is that to be different from the West it seems to be in conflict with having a commonality internally. Because if I take positions that are different from the West, then if I use those as the position of our civilization, I will find internal disagreement. The Sri Aurobindo people will say, I don't accept that, that's too Vaishnavite. The Vaishnavite, if it's leaning towards Advait, then some other school of Indian thought won't accept it, Buddhists won't accept it. So the internal manthan among the Indian schools of thought is very complicated also. And on the other hand, if I start with the Indian schools of thought, trying to sort it out, that can go on forever because people in the Indian systems have been arguing for hundreds of years and they haven't sorted it out, and I'm not going to sort it out, So this is a very complex problem. How to define an Indian position philosophically and metaphysically in such a delicate way, in such a carefully crafted way, that I can satisfy wide range of Indian thinkers who will say, yeah, we accept it, and at the same time show that it is quite different from the Western position. This is the trick that I have to do. Yeah, it's like if you're running a coalition government, then the coalition has to be sufficiently different from the opposition. Because if you have nothing different to say, why are you there? What do you offer? You have to be different. And yet you need unity within, among your own coalition partners. So you cannot be too sharply defined because you need to be inclusive and include all the partners within. And yet you cannot be too broadly defined because you need to be different from the other. So this is a challenge of simultaneously opposing things have to be balanced out. So that's the process and the methodology that I carried out. And one of the primary differences I've discovered is that the Westerners are obsessed with a unique and absolute history that they feel they have had. And no other history has the same status as their own. And this has to do with the Bible, the uniqueness of one Son of God, the origin of original sin, the idea that there is a virgin birth, there is idea that there is a crucifixion, and Jesus is sacrificed. And so this story of these particular historical points cannot be tampered with, cannot be compromised. It has to be taken literally. This is something they're very adamant about. And I coined the term history-centric. I call this behavior, this kind of mentality, history-centric. And in the Dharma traditions, The idea of the past is important only as a role model, as a guide on how you can live. But in the present moment, you same state of consciousness. You can evolve through yoga, through sadhana, through meditation. You have the potential in you to a higher exalted state of consciousness, which means whether it's easy to achieve or difficult to achieve doesn't matter, because in theory it's possible to achieve, so you're not totally dependent on history. So the use of history in the West has been a method of control. It's like, Microsoft Windows source code. Like the Microsoft people control that source code, and that is the whole reason they exist. So this particular history is that kind of intellectual property of the church, and without that they won't be able to exist. So controlling this historicity has become very obsessive, and the Dharma traditions, as contrasted with the Abrahamic traditions, I have a whole lot of discussion going on, that these are very different approaches to the truth. One is on studying history, and the other is on studying the self. It's a philosophical debate that I get into a lot. Another difference I find is that I found throughout my stay in the US that Indians are much more comfortable dealing with chaos, or what the Westerners call chaos. Things don't go exactly as expected, things are unpredictable, there may be some uncertainty, there may be some mix-up, things may be partly this and partly that, things may be opposites existing simultaneously, things are both X and not X at the same time. And Indians are more able to deal with complexity, so this is my finding, than Americans, who want to know, is it X or is it not X? It can't be both. When you have a meeting, when I would have a project meeting, there would be some Indians and some white Americans sitting there. Indians are having many conversations at the same time. So A is talking to B, C is talking to D, and E is talking to both A and B, and A is listening to D but talking to him. Now, the Westerners feeling extremely disturbed about it, very concerned. They're saying it's chaos. What is going on? Very difficult to figure out. And after a lot of, half an hour of this, okay, meeting is concluded, are we all agreeing? Indian are happy, satisfied, he can go do his job. Because he's filtered out multiple parallel conversations, parallel processing, and not having to be linear. And then the Westerners will come to my office and say, but I don't know what happened. I have no idea what they are saying. What are they saying? They're saying this and they're saying that. What are they saying? So I have to sit down and linearize it for them to make it clear. I found this to be a different trait between the Indians and the Westerners. And this became clear to me at the last Kumbh Mela in Haridwar. I was a guest of Swami Abdeshanand, who's the Juna Akhada, head of the Juna Akhada, where all the Naga sadhus go, and tens of thousands, lakhs of them. So I was staying with him, and there was a TV crew from the United States, ABC News. They wanted to do a documentary on Kumbh Mela. And they had spent 1 month in Haridwar interviewing a lot of people. So they were interviewing the Swami. And I had packed my bags, I was about to leave, my car was waiting. And the Swami says to them, you should interview this man also, he'll have something to say. So I said, okay, I'll stay and answer your questions. And they said, we just need a 5-minute clip from a lot of people, so 5 minutes. It turned out to be a 3-hour interview. Because the first question the guy asked is, he says, I'm asking everybody this question. How do we explain to the Americans, we've been here for a month and we've gone and seen all this. How do we explain to the Americans all this chaos? Yeah. So I said, see, I hadn't thought of saying it this way, but I just quickly got this idea. So I said that this chaos is your cognitive overload. You are not able to understand it. It overwhelms your models. Your models are very simple. You have 10 commandments for the whole cosmos. But 10 commandments, you cannot even run your TV station on 10 rules. It's more complex. Life is more complex than that. So your model of thinking is simple models. and you are expecting very, orderly things happening, very organized, predictable things happening, and everybody conforming, that sort of behavior. And here, things are not like that. You are calling it chaos, but if you ask, if you go to these guys who are doing different things, they are relaxed about it. They are doing their thing, and they are not worrying that somebody else is doing something different, and they are not trying to make it all uniform and everything should be same. They are not trying to do that. Everybody is happy, contented doing what he's doing, and that somebody else is doing something else does not bother him. So the chaos is not there in them. The chaos is in your own way of thinking. It's the Western obsession for order which makes this look like chaos. That's what I told him. He was very fascinated by that. He said, "You are the only guy who told me like that, because everybody else is apologetic and saying, oh no, these people are poor, they're not educated, they're not modern. One day we'll also become very orderly. But you are the only person who's given me you've reversed the gaze, and the problem is in our side, we're thinking that." So actually when they presented this, they took a lot of my discussion and made it main part of the documentary. That this appears to Westerners as chaos, but an Indian thinks that it's about us, that we are calling it chaos. So this sort of attitude towards decentralized, I give a chapter 4 is on order and chaos, the Indian and the Western attitudes towards order and chaos. In the Indian, both are important and they're held in balance. Order is important. What Westerners think chaos, we don't have a word in Sanskrit for chaos, by the way, because we do not have that obsession. So this decentralized, very, very complex, non-linear, unpredictable, uncertainty principle, all these kind of things, along with this very Newtonian, predictable, reductive order, these two opposites are both there in the Indian system. After all, you cannot say Indians cannot handle order, because if you look at the Harappan civilization, the Indus Valley civilization is the most orderly civil engineering, the most orderly constructed among the ancient world. So Indians certainly can do that. And you look at computer science, which requires very analytical, algorithmic thinking, or any of these things. So Indians can certainly do that. And yet the raga, when it's played, every time it's an improvisation. It is not there's no written scores like in Western music. You're repeating the same thing each time from written scores. It's improvised from within. It's a feeling. And the way dance is performed is highly improvised. I have a friend who wrote a bestseller, one of the first bestsellers on Indian cooking. It was called Curries Without Worries, something like that, 20-30 years ago. So I asked her, what made your book a bestseller in the US? Because a lot of people, these recipes are very ordinary. She says, I understood the Western mind, so my cooking book is written with things like, take so many ounces of this, heat it to so many degrees for so many minutes. Yes. And she says, an Indian chef would never think of this way. You go to any restaurant, no chef is weighing so many ounces and looking at thermometer temperature. But if you explain it like this, the Westerner understands it, and then he buys it, and my book is a bestseller. So it became a very big seller. So this person understood. Now, all this is going to help you in your product design. You see, Japanese are very clever. They understood the American mind and created products. Do you know who first put radios in cars? Japanese Toyota. First cars where there was a radio in the car was not Ford, was not General Motors, was not Chevrolet, was not Chrysler. Americans invented the car, and Americans invented the radio. Japanese understood that they're sitting in traffic jams for so long, they want to watch radio at home, but they're sitting in traffic jams, they're upset. So it's a Japanese mind which understood the psychology. That, hey, I put the radio in the car, and that was a big hit. That is how they started off with their big USP, as you call it. So this topic I'm saying is not irrelevant for technocrats and so on. I will stop because I want to hear what others have to say. But one final thing, those who are really serious about it, I have some 2-page notes on the book, which I'm happy to hand out to anybody who's going to be a serious reader. I would also love to have the email addresses of those who want to continue the online. We have an e-group and we're having an online discussion on this book. And those who are interested should give me a card or on a piece of paper your email address. I'll make you a member of that and then the discussion can continue. Thank you very much.
Professor N. Sri Kumar, Associate Professor, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Madras, giving his views about the book.
I don't know what it means to critique a book like this. I had it almost 2 weeks back. He had handed over this book and I was, of course, glancing, trying to read it, learn from it. And when we had a conversation before we assembled in this place, and I was reminded of my undergraduate class, philosophy, first philosophy class. Our philosophy teacher, we had an Indian philosophy paper. Our philosophy teacher has introduced this textbook. He said, this is going to be your textbook for philosophy, and he has given us a book in which the first chapter is about Vedic religion and philosophy. And we all started reading it because we were all so excited because new metaphors, new words, new things. I was basically a science student. So then there is this entire description about Vedic religion, polytheism, monotheism, henotheism, monism. Then one would wonder, where is Indian religion? Is this what the Vedic religion was? Can you really describe the religion of the Vedic people, which with these terms, these Western terms? Monotheism, polytheism. Polytheism is the catchword because a lot of deities are referred to. Agni, for example. And Agni is translated as fire. You're reducing Agni to fire, which is a material object. The first shloka of Rig Veda, I'm sorry for my poor Sanskrit, Agni Mile Purohidam, which roughly means, the salutation to that, again a non-translatable word, that Chaitanya. I'm sorry, it's a Malu pronunciation of the Sanskrit word. Okay, Chaitanyam, in Malayalam we call it, definitely Chaitana, the Sanskrit word. So that enlightening principle, salutations to that enlightening principle, which is there, which is the Pura Hitam, something which does hitam. Hitam is something which enlightens a thing to its potentials. That is Hitam. Puram is anything, any field of activity is a Puram. It can be your own body, your own being, your village. So salutations to that principle which basically unites us, which is the Atman in us. These are all non-translatable words, which one of your chapters wonderfully describes, the non-translatables. It's not just Sanskrit, it's Indian concepts, the experience of the Indian that is non-translatable, which you get only by living in this culture. You were mentioning about, in our informal conversation, you were mentioning about Wittgenstein, who is my favorite Western philosopher. So Wittgenstein talks about this, different language games, and where we engage playing with, and basically we have to understand every word by relating it with that particular game, by understanding the rules of that game. So the rules of the game can be learned only by playing the game. So one has to live it, one has to experience it. So this experiential aspect is repeatedly emphasized in Indian civilization by all Indian traditions, including the Charvakis, who are materialist. So I would rather, though I have been reading all these Indian philosophy books and many other books on Indian thought, one of your expressions, the dharmic traditions, that catched my attention, because it's I think it's very appropriate to use the word dharmic, because again dharma is a word which cannot be translated. Dharma is an experience, again, in Brihadharanya Upanishad, I believe, in Brihadaranya Upanishad, dharma is equated with Brahman. So this equation with Brahman, it's not a cognitive concept here in India. It's an experiential notion. It's an anubhuti, something which needs to be lived with. Your being has to be fulfilled with that. So this is a context in which I was trying to place the book when I read it, and I see that there is a question of identity has been raised on multiple occasions in this book, or repeatedly raised in many chapters. In all the chapters, almost all the chapters, live with this concern for this identity, and also calling for an Indian gaze, an Indian look at how the rest of the world is, particularly the West is. So here, one interesting, I am a student of, when he introduced me, he has read out that I specialize in continental philosophy. Yeah, that's true to some extent. Continental European philosophy. When you say continental, it is European, right? Very sad. As if there are no other continents. So, continental European philosophy, I particularly specialize in hermeneutics. So, I was also wondering that there is a necessity for hermeneutically relating ourselves with the West, which has never happened, as in this book he points out. How the West has always looked at us, interpreted us, made us understand this is what we are. So this is an attempt to understand the West from, it's not, I don't want to reduce it by saying from our perspective. I would rather say hermeneutically understand the West. And when I say hermeneutically understand the West, it's not, situating ourselves in our paradigm and trying to evaluate and access the West, but rather engaging a dialogue with the West. So that's what I mean by hermeneutically relating ourselves to the West. So this book, I hope, would inaugurate this step, hermeneutically, approaching the West, appropriating the West and understanding it, dialoguing with the West. The West has always been doing something else. I would, again, another theme which rather figures in this book, which attracted me, is the concept of unity, which the author was trying to argue that the notion of unity which the Indian or the Dharmic traditions were trying to advocate is different from the kind of unity which the Western civilization has been trying to project. So it's a different kind of universalism. It's not universal or objective in the philosophical sense in which we understand it, but it's a different kind of unity which the Indian or the Dharmic traditions. I've started using the word, even in my classroom today I started using the word dharmic after reading your book. So this unique perspective which the Indians have to offer by establishing or experiencing unity, which again I would say is anubhuti, which the four Mahavakyas of Indian tradition I'll advocate this anubhuti, this unity. Prajnanam Brahma. Praharshena Jnanam is Brahma. I am Atma Brahma. This experience of me is not different from the ultimate reality. The third one is Aham Brahmasmi. I am this self is not different from that. I am that. And the fourth one, of course, not in the order. Tattvamasi, you are that. You means here not the empirical self. Not the again, this English translations, empirical self, as if there is a transcendental self. There is no transcendental self and empirical. There is only one self, Atman, which is the Agni, which is the Brahman. Okay, anyway, since we have to speak the language of those people who colonized us to understand each other, that's a limitation. Okay, coming back, I would conclude here. This concept of unity which I was talking about, which the Indian tradition has always projected as an experience, as an anubhuti, which is being advocated by all our texts. But it's interesting to see how this concept of unity, I'm sorry if I'm philosophizing too much, Rather, he has explained it in very plain language, not a very sophisticated language he has used, but we philosophers are trained for that, sir. We use a lot of terms, but of course I assure that I won't be taking more than 2 or 3 minutes. See, what attracted me is there are two ways in which unity can be established. One is dialectical approach. The other one is dialogical. And we Indians have adopted both. Shankara, for example, was dialectical. More dialectical than dialogical. Because you have a Purva Paksh and you are in argument with the Purva Paksh. You assume that these are going to be your opponents. And then you develop the opponent's arguments as well as your own arguments against the opponent's arguments and finally establish your view. So this is more dialectical and more argumentative, tarkical in Sanskrit. The other one is dialogical, which you can find in the Upanishads. Upanishads also have dialectical, but more dialogical, where I have to use the terminology of one great German Acharya, Hans-Georg Gadamer, 20th century philosopher who lived almost 3 centuries. He was born in 1900, died in 2002, 102 years old. Great philosopher. I had my PhD dissertation on his work. He talks about a dialogue which ultimately concludes with a fusion of horizons. Where horizons are fused, you're not really end up with separating yourself with the other, but understanding the underlying unity, which is again an anubhuti. But for that, you need a platform. And Rajiv ji's work is offering you that platform. And only we Indians can do that, probably, because we are fortunate to have this cultural paradigm, being in India. Probably India is the only country which the Westerners have ruled is left with its civilization. No other country could retain its civilization. I mean, we have retained it to some extent. In that way, we are fortunate. So let us all continue this journey with this book and several such books, and also with discussions, with dialogue, and finally hope to end up with a fusion of horizons. Thank you.
Professor Venkat R. Krishnan, Professor, Organizational Behavior and Director, Yale Great Lakes Center for Management Research at Great Lakes Institute of Management, Chennai. So I would like to invite Dr. Venkat R. Krishnan to give his views about the book. Please.
I spent the last couple of days reading this book. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Thoroughly. When I was reading this book, I was instantly remembering the lectures of Swami Vivekananda on universal religion. Because if we are going to value differences, we should do something about enhancing the differences. So instead of wishing away the differences by means of something called difference anxiety, which the author introduces, instead of difference anxiety consuming us, we should do something by which the differences will be enhanced, encouraged. So what he introduces nicely, in fact the best thing about this book, the main unique argument I found in this book, otherwise I would call something like the unique contribution of this book, is after discussing digestion, which he briefly mentioned, how one culture understands another culture, finds out the good and the bad things in that culture, all those good things, superior culture will claim, oh, we already had all those things. So it sort of removes all the good things, claiming it already had those. So this inferior culture has only those useless things. It makes the inferior culture ashamed of itself, so it doesn't want to exist only, so it is digested. The biggest question that came out of this book is there any serious problem because of this digestion? I like this argument. Digestion actually causes a problem in terms of further differences not being created. If you are going to value differences, we should go on producing more and more. Like Vivekananda argues, everybody should have his own religion. So which means we should go on increasing the differences. If this digestion happens, see what has happened, the inferior culture somehow dies out. It's not going to create further differences. If we are not creating further differences, we are losing out. human welfare is enhanced only if you are going to further enhance more and more of these differences. In other words, if we enhance more differences, the world will be a richer place. It will be a much, enriched place. That's what we want, which is why we should go on increasing the differences rather than trying to remove the differences. So both the superior culture as well as the supposedly inferior culture will want to do away with the differences, while I think the book is making a strong case in terms of our focusing on the value of the differences, idea being we increase the quantum of those differences and not wish them away. And I think there is a major unintended consequence, unintended because I don't think the author intended this. Unintended consequence is that you actually, end up feeling proud of yourself. After this Macaulay education, Macaulay wrote in the 1830s, after having implemented his Macaulay system of education, which follows to this day in this country, he wrote to his father, "I'm very happy to inform you, my education system is working wonders. Every Indian is ashamed to call himself an Indian." This Macaulay system of education continues to this day. We are all products of that system of education. When you go through this book, actually, you start questioning, am I being stupid in being ashamed of myself when you have so much to be proud of? And all those chapters he describes in terms of the different, whether it is integral unity or synthetic unity, in terms of, history-centric. This culture does not depend on personalities. We can kill all those people, still we will survive. A culture that depends on one personality can never reach anywhere near an acceptable level of universalism. It's not possible. How can you force everybody to accept one human being? You don't like somebody's face, how can you accept? So innumerable personalities is a requirement for any religion to go towards universal state. So I think one unintended consequence of reading this book is that it really enhances your pride in yourself. We have so much. And simply assuming, the Western world has everything to offer is just falling a prey to the phenomenon of digestion. If you are going to accept that, we have simply been digested. Very sad state to be in. So in conclusion, I very strongly recommend that all of you should read this book in full, complete, not just the summary sheet he is giving. Thank you.
The session is open for questions.
Yeah. I am Deepak Johnson from Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. Sir, you talked about being different, but taking Sanskrit as a representative of Indian culture or Indian civilization is narrow for me. Because core of Indian civilization is not Sanskrit alone. And why don't we mention about Tamil conference? Or the question can be, is there a pan-Indian culture as you would talk about? For me, to use your terminology, I found that other civilizations are being digested by Sanskrit. So, how do you respond to this view?
Yeah, it's an important question. There is this view, which is also a European view. There's a previous book I wrote called Breaking India. Previous book, which just came out in February, which talks about this whole history of the Aryan-Dravidian divide. Starting 200 years ago, because until Bishop Caldwell started this concept of a Dravidian race and a Dravidian identity, linguistic separation, religious separation, racial separation, if you look at the earlier classics, within the Tamil classics, there is no sense of the others being, being outsiders, being opposed to them or being tense. This tension which has been created is a product of the last 200 years. You do not see evidence from the Tamil literature side of having tension or anxiety about the non-Tamil culture. So that's one part I want to say there. Tamil itself has a large percentage of Sanskrit words and vice versa. There are about 20%, I attended a conference somewhere, about 20 or 25% common words. And there is the concept of Sanskriti. In this book, there is a difference between Sanskrit and Sanskriti. Sanskriti is a culture and a civilization, not a language. So you go to Southeast Asia, where they don't know Sanskrit, but there is a Sanskriti, in the ideas that they are presenting. So for instance, non-history centrism, history centrism being the Judeo-Christian Abrahamic approach of a linear sequence of historical events which is absolute, without which you cannot get your salvation. It is the only history that happened, it's unique, and all other histories that differ must be negated and whatever. Tamil literature does not talk history centrism. So the first major difference that I talk about in this book, which is history centrism versus non-history centrism, is shared with Tamil literature, using a different language, but the Sanskriti of ideas is common. Second big difference I talk about is the sense of unity. The sense of unity, being integral unity, is in the Shaiva Siddhantas and Tirukural in the Tamil literature. In my earlier book, Breaking India, talks about that in great length. And my co-author is a Tamil gentleman living in Kanyakumari. That book is also available. I don't know if they have it here. But this whole issue of Tamil, non-Tamil, Dravidian, Aryan, all that, in that book we've covered it in detail. Now, the idea of non-translatability, in fact, in here I give examples like, a dosa should not be translated as a paratha or a pancake or a pizza, because it loses the experience that certain people have who have come up with this dish, and their way of preparing it and their way of experiencing it, describing it, is very unique. So I give my example using Sanskrit. That doesn't mean that other languages don't have distinctiveness. In fact, I also say that there are non-translatables in Arabic. There are non-translatables in Mandarin. So if you have the different civilizations with different historical experiences captured in their own unique words, those ought to be preserved, and there's no reason to digest Tamil into Sanskrit. I mean, others may be doing it. I am not in favor of that. I in fact prefer that regional languages of India should be preserved, not just Tamil, but every regional language should be preserved. And what bothers me is that these languages are being downsized in the number of schools and publications and replaced with English. That is a matter of concern. I realize that English being so powerful, there's no point in, it's a futile idea trying to fight English, so we are all English speaking. So my proposal is that everybody who comes from a certain language, so you come from Tamil, that's fine for you, somebody comes from, Marathi and whatever, should take non-translatables of their language, which they think are very, very critical. Not the whole language, but take certain words which are non-translatable and introduce them into English, teach other people about it. So I'm planning on introducing 50 to 75 or so Sanskrit words, explain why they cannot be translated to English, like Shakti can't be called energy. It's just not this way. There are certain words like that. And it's very common to mistranslate them just to be easy. And the same thing should be done for another language. So I have no problem with that. I mean, I'm not saying that Tamil should be replaced with Sanskrit or any of that. That would be a contradiction from my point of view.
European philosophy is trying to make universal claims. Doesn't Indian systems of philosophy try to create a universal explanation? What's your view on that?
I think there is a difference between a claim of universalism and universalism. There's a difference between truth and truth claim. Truth claim means somebody says, this is my claim of truth. So in a court, two opposing truth claims come to the table. Right? Each is trying to prove the point. So claims made by philosophy are truth claims. And I think what the gentleman intended, as I understand it, and certainly my view is, that we should view the different ideas of different civilizations as truth claims, and a seat at the table with no one privileged. But unfortunately the West has privileged itself because of its military power over the last 500 years, and imposed its version as the universal version for everybody. And in the final chapter, what I propose is a sort of a round table or a parliament of civilizations, where we are all making our claims, each one claiming that I understand the truth. That is our starting point. And in this book, I did not want to take that, assume that I'm going to speak for all the parties around the table and conclude who's right. That would be arrogant. So I merely want difference in the sense that I'm sufficiently different from the dominant Western culture that I deserve a seat at the table, but so does X and so does Y. Yeah? So I'm not the only one, but they all deserve a seat at the table. So this congress of philosophies or dialogue of civilizations, as the gentleman said, or a kind of a roundtable discussion of different worldviews is the right approach for humanity to go forward. And then I think the excellent point was made was that Indians are in a unique position to do this because we have this sense of non-exclusivity. There is not my way or no way. That is not, we don't have. My way is the best way for me. But maybe some other way is good for you. So I enjoy my dosa, but you can enjoy pizza and not bother me. It's not like that. Now, so the person who's a Shaivite says that Shiva is my universal. But I have no problem that something else is your universal. That is a big issue. Exclusivity versus non-exclusivity is a very, very serious problem, because large part of the world crisis today, in terms of the religious and ideological conflicts which are getting worse, and they're not going to go away in your lifetime, let me tell you that, they're going to get pretty bad, has to do with exclusivity claims. And these exclusivity claims come from traditions based on history centrism. You see, let me give you this example. The status of Jesus in Islam and in Christianity are incompatible. In Christianity, he must be son of God and not just another prophet. In Islam, he is a great prophet, but not son of God. But this is not a trivial matter. You see, in Christianity, there is original sin. Adam and Eve do something, and that is called original sin. So God curses them that all their future progeny, means everybody born, their offspring, is condemned to eternal damnation. Eternal damnation, not finite damnation, but infinite, eternal damnation. Nobody can. So no human being who is progeny of Adam and Eve, and everybody is, has the capacity to get out of this on their own. So the only solution is God has to take birth as Jesus and suffer on behalf of everybody else so that the problem can be solved. But there's one more hitch. This is where the Islam will have a problem. If God takes birth as human progeny, then he was born sinner also. So if Jesus were born through male-female sexuality, father-mother, not virgin birth, but human father, human mother, then by virtue of the curse given to all progeny of Adam and Eve, Jesus would also be progeny of Adam and Eve, and therefore born as a sinner. And if he's born as a sinner, he's not going to solve other people's problems. He is himself a sinner. So the only human being in the history of humanity, before Jesus, after Jesus, the only human being ever born, not a sinner, has to be born by virgin birth, which means God impregnates. It's not progeny of Adam and Eve, but God impregnates. And because God impregnates, therefore it violates the requirement of being progeny, because it's not father, mother. Therefore, he is the only person born free of original sin. Therefore, he can serve the purpose and solve the problem. Now, Islam, while respecting Jesus, do not accept virgin birth and son of God. Why? Because suppose you accept that suppose the Islam theologian would, and I've done all this manthan with all these guys, by the way, suppose Islam were to accept that Jesus is son of God, then the prophet in Islam cannot supersede son of God. Cannot. It's like you have vice chancellor and he is issued some instructions, he is the highest authority. Somebody may be professor or dean or head of department, he cannot supersede. Son of God is God himself incarnate through virgin birth, and a regular prophet who's a mortal human being cannot update. So it's like Windows 7, you can only have Microsoft produce Windows 8. I cannot produce something and say it's Windows 8. They won't accept it. Because if they were to accept it, that Rajiv has come up with Windows 8, then they're finished, they're out of business. So if Christians were to accept the claim that Muhammad supersedes, which is the Islamic claim, that Christianity is good, Jesus was a prophet, but there is a new prophet. So there was release X, now we got X plus 1. That's the Islamic claim. If that is required for Islam to be valid. Otherwise, why would you need it? If that is the Son of God, is final. There is no other Son of God. So a prophet cannot supersede Son of God. Therefore, they have to downgrade Jesus from Son of God to prophet. Jesus is only a prophet according to Islam, not a Son of God. Now you go back and ask the Christians, are you willing to accept that? They'll say, hell no. How can we accept it? Because if he's just a regular prophet, no matter how good, then the new prophet might as well go for the latest release. You see? So this is incompatibility between the two of them because they are both history-centric. They cannot resolve this problem without one or the other being compromised. Never. That's just the way it is. Now, another example of the same point is that there is this book of Revelation in the Bible which says that there will be a second arrival of Jesus, second arrival of Christ, and then all problems will be solved, there will be no more evil, this will be like eternal, everything wonderful going on. But there is something human beings have to do as a precondition. Human beings, according in this book, have to restore the kingdom of Israel to its original state. Restore the kingdom of Israel to its original state. Why do you think all this war is going on? You have to understand the religious conflict behind it. It's not just political war for territory. It is required to restore the kingdom of Israel. Now the kingdom of Israel, the center thing in it was a temple called the Temple of David. The Temple of David is today a mosque. So restoring the kingdom of David would require taking over that mosque. The Jews have to take over the mosque and remove the mosque and make a Temple of David again. This is required in the book of Revelation in the Bible as a precondition for Christ to come back again. So on the one hand, there is this belief which says this mosque must be taken and turned back into the Temple of David. Yeah? But that mosque is not an ordinary mosque. That is the mosque from where Muhammad reached paradise. His final departure for paradise happened in that spot. They built a mosque there. So history centrism of one requires destroying the history centrism of the other in both directions. So when you have a tradition stuck on history centrism and it has a collision with another history centric religion, it is a battle to the end. Because if there is, for me to be legitimate, you are violating my legitimacy, I have to finish you off. It's that kind of a thing. So my sense is that Indian thought as represented here, its strength being non-history centric is a very unique strength. I have been asked to mediate dialogues and encounters where in Princeton there is some group doing Jewish, Christian and Islamic discussion. So they told me about it. So I said, why don't you invite a Hindu and a Buddhist and a Jain? And they said, well, because we don't have problems with them, we have problems with each other. So I said, rather than excluding me, maybe I got a solution. So why do you have only people around the table who got problems? Maybe you should have somebody around the table who got solutions. So we said, what would be your approach? I said, my approach would be to try and convince them that if they can dilute and reduce their history centrism, they can still respect their history but not exclusively. They can still respect their great exemplars but not in a literal history. That approach which we have might allow them to coexist and live together. So this lady was so impressed, she wrote in this book, I've quoted her, towards the end of chapter 2, she wrote an editorial in her magazine saying that there is this one guy, he comes up with a very original idea, we guys never thought of it. And this is his idea that we are history-centric and that is our problem. And so this is considered, this insight that they are history-centric and needn't be, and history-centrism is the problem, is positioned in their debate as a very big breakthrough for them. Very big breakthrough for them. So that's the Indian contribution, in my opinion. Yes.
I just wondered whether we are mixing up history with myths, because a lot of what about Jesus and then the subsequent events may not be part of history but part of the myth.
For you. But ask a well-informed Christian theologian, are you willing to accept Jesus as myth? You see, we project ourselves because we are able to deal with it comfortably. The reason for historicity has to do with man having original sin which cannot be redeemed. We are incapable of solving that problem as human beings. There is no reincarnation. You have one life and you're born a sinner and you cannot solve the problem on your own. You can pray, you can do what you want until God comes, takes an incarnation through virgin birth, so he is not himself a sinner, and through that only he can suffer for you. So God came and suffered for you on the cross. This piece of history, if it is myth, it means that there is no redemption from sin possible today. This cannot be myth. This is the Christian doctrine. And if you want to search under Nicene Creed, Nicene Creed, C-R-E-E-D. We need to understand somebody else. In Purva Paksha, I understand somebody according to their doctrine, not according to what I think they ought to believe. That's not Purva Paksha. Purva Paksha means I start by listening to him, saying, you please explain to me what is your belief. And then only I can respond to it. And the Christian belief in Nicene Creed is a requirement. You look at Methodist, Baptist, Catholic, you look at various major denominations, maybe some on the margins are different, but you look at major denominations of Christianity and you look at their websites and there you have a search, so you put in Nicene Creed, they'll tell you the Nicene Creed is all literal history, no myth allowed there, literal history as a requirement for membership. So you can keep thinking it's all myth, but then it's not Christianity, it is your idea of Christianity.
I'm sorry, I think I wasn't understood properly. Maybe I could explain a little further.
Sure.
Jesus could be a part of the historicity that we're talking of.
Yes.
But the concepts that we explain that comes subsequently after Jesus, perpetrated either by the church or by the Islamic community where they have their own ideology, they could be part of the ideological warfare as a result of the myths that have been incorporated somehow into the historicity.
Give me an example of what you would consider a Christian myth, and I will tell you, let's ask a Christian whether he's willing to call it a Christian myth. Because you see, you are so comfortable, the part of the book you should read is called Itihas versus History. I describe this point. I use Itihas and contrast it with history. And I use Itihas as not the same thing as history. Itihas is a different meaning which is more flexible and not linear. Many parallel stories could be going on and different things could be happening. We can accept all of them. And Itihas is flexible in the sense that we can adapt it and update it for the present context and reinterpret the past in the present context. But history, the word comes from his story. His is God. It is God's story. That is how the word, the etymology of the word history, it comes from. And that is a literal event. You see, you must understand that in our tradition, man is Satchitanand, means he is God, he is one with Brahman. So we have no infinite gap between us and Brahman because Brahman is all-pervading. So we are intimately with Brahman. But in the Abrahamic religions, the starting point is different. God is infinitely removed from the cosmos and infinitely removed from individual souls. That infinite gap, it is not available for souls to evolve and tune in and download that information. It only gets transmitted when God transmits it through a prophet. He has stopped doing that centuries ago. He used to do it, he sent a sequence of prophets, and that's like release 1, then release 2, then release 3, then release 4. And he stopped doing it. And your only recourse is to find that history of that particular release, which only the institution claims to have, and you better get it from this institution. Otherwise, on your own, there is no way you can tune in and download it from God's website, because he doesn't do it that way. So this is the issue with history centrism as a linear sequence of releases that come from God through various prophets, which has ended. No more releases are coming. Either in Christianity, that's final, or in Islam, that's final. So you, the average person, got no direct access. If you bypass, in the case of Islam, somebody says, I don't want anything to do with the Prophet, but I want to be a good Muslim, it's a contradiction. You cannot do that. If in the case of Christianity you say, I'll download this from God by doing some meditation and become a rishi and get it, this is our way of thinking. But it's alien to them, it's not allowed, you are just deluding yourself, you will go to hell, because this is not even possible. So the possibility of somebody who says Tattvamasi, I am that, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, the possibility exists that I can have that experience, which means that according to our way of looking, that knowledge which the rishis gave us, Shruti we call it, is downloadable by everybody. Everybody. You just have to clean your act, evolve to a certain point, and then you can tune in. But if another ideology is based not on the idea that the self is Satchitanand, but an infinite gap between the self and God, permanent, never bridge gap, then you are a slave of history. And that is the notion of history centrism that I'm talking about in this book.
My name is Loganathan from Chemistry Department faculty. This question is related to your observation that when we go there to the US or to the West, we feel not so confident. You mentioned that that is the other side, your children, and generally in US, children go to school, they learn their country's history, and they will be very confident. Also, there was a reference to Macaulay's, Himalayan damage when whatever he did. And I read that whatever he spoke, which was there in the internet, and I do believe that whatever has been said in the internet has actually happened. So now my question to you is probably not related directly to the book. What you, as a person who has understood all these concepts and you have lived in the US, can be done to undo what Macaulay done to India?
Okay, my book is actually a small, humble step in that direction. I am trying to educate through debate with the Westerners. I'm not trying to convert them and change them. I am trying to debate with Westerners for the benefit of my fellow Indians, to show that first of all, stop thinking that everything is same, because it is not according to them. If according to them there is difference, we are fools not knowing our difference. They are asserting difference, educating their difference. It's like saying that, it's like somebody says, my property is mine and your property is ours. Yeah? Kind of. Okay. So why one way? Yeah? So we are fools saying, oh yeah, very good, sound like fun, my property is ours, very good, it's a public park, everybody can enjoy, but everybody else's property is there, This is not a sensible thing to do. And all these people who say we've survived 5,000 years and we'll survive forever, I say this is bunk. For, even 2,000 years ago we were 5 times the size. We were from Afghanistan, not only till Bangladesh, but all the way to Bali. And from Sri Lanka, not only to Kashmir, but Tibet and Kazakhstan, and the Buddhists went to China, Mongolia. Our Dharma civilization was all over Asia. We're maybe 20% of that today. Once one top businessman, industrialist, big famous guy was talking like all people, we are this 5,000, we'll never. So I said to him, I said, sir, suppose you're an industrialist, your chief financial officer comes to you and says, no problem, our market share went down 80%, our income is down to 20%, but we're still eating dal, roti, we haven't gone bankrupt. Will you be happy? So he said, you're very angry. He said, no, I'll fire the guy. So I said, why is your standard different for your own civilization who's been downsized, and the predators did not even exist 2,000 years ago. They're young civilizations that are expanded, taken more than half the world. And even in the map, even in the country of India, we're not safe now. If there may be further partitions. You may have, and for that I've written the book Breaking India to talk about that. So I feel that the time has come, we must first understand our difference, refuse to get translated and digested into another civilization as second-class citizens, because you become second-class citizens in somebody else's scheme of things. You will never be at par with him in understanding that framework, which is, they have a long history of understanding it. You'll become a second-class person, they'll be the boss, they'll pass judgment on you, you're always trying to impress them. That's what will happen. So I have pointed out 4 or 5 very serious areas of difference, which if you were to read the book, you can understand them, and I would recommend you read each chapter twice. You read a chapter and you pause, understand it, then read it a second time and it will make more sense to you, and then call it a day before you go to the next chapter. So that way you will get these ideas, and then you'll start living differently, seeing the world differently, saying that I have certain things about my culture and civilization which I will not negotiate away. They are non-negotiable. Like I'm very happy the gentleman saying Tamil is non-negotiable for me. Good for you. I like that, because I think Indians have no problem with that. We have never had a problem that somebody else is different. We're okay with it. Our is an open architecture. The internet, and I give these examples. Like in internet, there's so many service providers and so many websites, and as long as I have mine, you got yours, and we're fine. It's not a central mainframe computer model that I control this mainframe and you got dumb terminals, you access me. It's not the central model. It's a very decentralized model. Yeah? And that's why this chapter called Order and Chaos explains that unfortunately the Indian government and Indian media, they use the word, when something is not the organized sector, which for them means corporate Western style organized sector, they call it unorganized. I call it self-organized. Self-organized is a very powerful thing. Self-organized meaning that you're not dependent on a central top-down hierarchy authority to be organized. You organize yourself. So if you organize yourself, it's a very empowering thing. So I feel that there are certain concepts of that kind which are applicable to business leaders, corporate leaders, religious leaders, our individuals. And if we as individuals understand this and refuse to get digested, others will follow. I lived in the United States for 40 years. I am not digested. In fact, I got a line of Westerners wanting to get digested into my civilization. If I wanted to become a different kind of guru than the normal guru, I could convert a whole lot of them. It's just that my calling is different. But it's just up to me to make sure I don't get digested. And living there doesn't make any difference.
I see a very good comparison because some people said with medicine.
Yeah.
Western approach to medicine is lenient.
Yes.
In life, medicine is not lenient.
Yes, correct.
It is complex.
Yes.
The world has carried us also.
That is correct.
Our human body is existing.
That's correct.
It is very complex.
You see, and the thing is, we have a civilization of complexity, and we have a mind that can handle complexity. I've done studies, very interesting. I look at Indian post office clerk and US post office clerk. So the Indian post office clerks, a lot of people he's handling same time. He takes this guy's money, and as he goes to handle the money, he's bringing the thing back to this guy, and then he's listening to these 3 guys, and he's arguing with that fellow. Now, the American post office clerk is very ticked off at any such behavior. He says, I'll do the whole transaction, beginning to end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever the thing is, one guy, before he even start talking to anybody. So this linear thinking is there. Now linear thinking also has its advantages, because in certain endeavors, you better be organized. You better know how to follow orders. If you are in an army, you cannot say, I'll do my own improvisation. Sir, I am improvised soldier. So I'll improvise my fighting. You can't do that. I mean, there's something called, teamwork, and there's something called individual creativity. Indians are different from Chinese in their character because Chinese are not individually oriented, creative, self-organized. They need all the taxi drivers in a huge city would have one employer, their employees. So they're not figuring out clever ways of getting ahead and doing their thing because they just have a job. It's like a job, sarkari job, government. Whereas the entrepreneur here, even rickshawala, he's got his own business. He's got his own business. The street vendor, he's got his own business. So improvised, individual thinking, decentralized, these are some of our characteristics which come out in leadership, in business, in all kinds of ways. But we should have both. That is what the Samudra Manthan is about, order and chaos. We should also know how to be orderly when that is required, and not be sort of too much dissenting and too much fighting and too sort of fragmented and anarchical. That is a tendency that we have, which is a kind of a weakness.
Sir, my question is rather factual. Do you think the ancient Indian civilization has had a stronger scientific foundation than the West? And if so, can you give the examples?
See, it's a huge subject. I'm glad you had this interest. My foundation started a 20-volume series called History of Indian Contributions to Science and Technology. And IIT Kanpur professor who unfortunately passed away, Balasubramaniam, he was a metallurgist. He's done on the Delhi Iron Pillar and the Indian history of steel. We have Indian metallurgy was pioneered the disport of pure zinc through distillation for hundreds of years. Enough records on that. You look at textiles, you look at the advanced manufacturing of construction tiles in Harappa. You look at they had a binary weight system in Harappa. The weights were relative 1:2:4 weight like that. So you see a huge amount of very systematic scientific thinking happening in India. I have no doubt that a large amount of the Western scientific progress actually sent from India. And there is evidence of transmission of calculus or pre-calculus. Infinite series came from India. There's a Kerala school which had a lot of infinite series mathematics. And the concept of infinitesimal, which is quite a breakthrough coming out of here, which is pre-calculus, as you all know. That's how they create the idea of calculus and so on. So Indian contributions have been enormous. When India got invaded, all kinds of universities and centers of learning got destroyed, and the people who invaded, they are not interested in learning, they are just interested in milking the system, and the system had a huge amount of wealth until 1750, according to the Cambridge History of World Economics. There's a World Economics multi-volume Cambridge history. They've done this. Until 1750, India had 24% of world GDP. And the West, as defined in United States and Europe combined, had less than, say, 7-8%. India was a bigger economy than the West by 3 times. And in 90 years, India got deindustrialized down to less than 2% of world GDP, and the West became more than 80%. So you have to understand the history of what happened in that period. What happened in that period, the dismantling of education, the dismantling of manufacturing. There was a guy called Dharma. He was a Gandhian, and we gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award soon before he died, some years ago. As a young man, he sailed to England to go to the East India Company office, and there was no fax, photocopy type systems in those days. He had to manually transcribe volumes and volumes. He spent years and years, 10 hours a day in the library, to copy the British East India Company records of things happening in India, because they would never publish it, because why would they publish these things? He copied them, and he produced multiple volumes on some of the things that happened in the 1800s in India under colonial rule, when technology and manufacturing were disassembled and brought down and outlawed. Steel was an Indian innovation. Even in very early times, Greek records and Roman records show that the toughest steel for using it as armament for a shield and for a sword they would buy from India. It was called wood steel, W-O-O-T-Z, steel. And this steel they could not make, but it was brought from India. That's how steel was. British they did a lot of R&D to understand how steel is made. And another interesting thing few people know is that when London Bridge was being constructed, the East India Company concluded that the best steel to make it would be imported from India. A large part of the London Bridge steel was from India, that's the London Bridge today. Now, the steel industry in India was outlawed on the basis that people can make guns and they can use it for weapons and it will be hostile, all kind of arguments given, and it was outlawed, steel industry. And this Jamshedji Tata, who is the founder of Tata, had to plead with the British for a very long time to get permission to start Tata Iron and Steel. And the permission was given for only a very small quantity of license that we could build only so much, because the British didn't want competition. So for a very long time, Indian steel industry disappeared. It all had to be imported. And then Jamshedji Tata started one small unit. That's all there was. So, when you look at what has happened to science and technology, I'm very sad that I spent so many years developing this 20-volume series, out of which 9 volumes are ready. I tried to convince Penn IIT, why don't IIT people take this up? It's not my job, I'm one guy. Why don't IIT people introduce a course on history of Indian science and technology so that technocrats know all this? Why don't they take over the publishing of these books, because it's very difficult for me to go around, marketing these books. Penn IIT or IIT or some particular IIT should take over the project. I'll be more than happy to donate, contribute all the work I've done over 15 years with the help of so many scholars, 30 or 40 scholars that we've funded, so that the work can continue, so that future generations can understand the history of Indian science and technology. Because nobody else is going to do it for you. It's the Indian people who are going to do it. So what better place than an IIT to have such a project? I started this entirely on my own, and I haven't got any support from anybody. But your question is a very important question on Indian contributions to science and technology, which are not adequately understood and appreciated. And it takes 3 years for each of those volumes. Some expert professor somewhere in India, some technocrat, some historian have to work together to, each volume takes that long to do. But there is a wealth of information in that.
My friend and I were discussing yesterday about unity in diversity and whether it works. And your talk about how the need to be different from the West, but at the same time we have to have, we can't be too sharp in our differences with each other. Right? So what is your take on this unity in diversity?
So, chapter 3 of this book is called Integral Unity and Synthetic Unity. One of the persons commenting explained it very nicely. There are two ideas of unity I'm contrasting. The Indian ideas are calling it integral unity, and the Western idea I'm calling it synthetic unity. Integral unity means there is an underlying unity which pre-exists, and out of that manifests diversity. So the diversity does not have to be artificially put together to unify it, because it came out of the unity. It's an organic system. Synthetic unity is that initially there's only separate things. They exist separately. So a car is synthetic unity because tire is made and battery is made and paint is made, and then they're put together. So a synthetic unity is sort of an assembly job, and it always has the risk of falling apart. Therefore, the obsession of control and aggression to keep it together, because the fear that it will fall apart is always there, because there is no inherent unity. Whereas in an integral unity, the unity is inherent. You can't even destroy it even if you wanted to, because that's the nature of reality. So we call it Brahman. Buddhists have a different term for it. But that integral unity is common to all Dharma traditions. That is a very important point in this book. That in the existence of integral unity in our philosophy, cosmology, metaphysics means we can be as diverse as we want, but deep down underneath all this diversity, that unity is so fundamental to the nature of the cosmos that it can't be taken away. So we don't have an obsession to keep forcing a unity and keep making you like me, or keep worrying that you're not like me. That difference anxiety is not there because of the integral unity. Therefore there's no reason for difference anxiety. Whereas in the Western system, the it is called the atomic worldview. So different entities exist separately from each other. It is a Newtonian Cartesian model of the physical world, and the Judeo-Christian model in a spiritual sense, in a theological sense, is also separation of God and humans and cosmos and all that. So when you are starting with separate things and then you're trying to figure out how to unify them, then you're always going to have to keep unifying them. You're always worrying that they may not be kept together. You're going to become a control freak. You're going to become very aggressive. Anything that is not part of this unity is an outsider. You either have to genocide him or kill him or include him, colonize him and force him in. So this whole behavior of this kind of the Western behavior stems from the synthetic unity that they have assumed. And our relaxed nature vis-a-vis the diversity and what they think is chaos, okay, that relaxed attitude comes from, and the lack of difference anxiety comes from the underlying unity that we do not have to do anything about because it's already there. So that's how deep is the unity and diversity philosophical idea of India. I'll give you some bad news. The bad news is when we adopt the Western colonized frame of mind, we destroy ourselves. And so what has happened is a huge colonization of Western philosophy, Western sociology, Western ways of thinking, even Western aesthetics of what constitutes beauty. You know, that is happening. I have collected, during my visits to India, I've come to India every year 4 times, for 40 years. Every year I've come, because I have projects here and there, learn, whatever, relatives, and I visit, and I don't just sit in Delhi where my family is, I go everywhere and learn, you know, understand people, things. So I found that, and I collect magazine ads. People wonder why you're collecting magazine ads. So I collect the ads that women read magazine and men, you know, jewelry, fashion, undergarments, this, that. And I do it as a reflection on what society is like at a given point. It's very interesting. Since the 70s when I left, the models used are more like white. The attitudes of the man, what kind of clothes he's wearing or what kind of value system he has, is westernized. So it's not only in philosophy, it's also in aesthetics. The idea of aesthetics is shifted. So this is going to have its cost in puncturing and destroying this integral unity, because you're bringing a synthetic unity model here. And the book Breaking India, which came before this, talks about the fault lines that are being created and exacerbated in India with a whole lot of interventions coming from various places. And that causes a disruption, a kind of breakup in the unity and diversity model. So while I'm on the one hand very happy and proud that this exists in our philosophy, on the other hand I'm also worried that it may not be that secure, considering that we are forgetting all this and moving in another direction.
5 days ago I didn't know who you were. My colleague mentioned your name and Breaking India and being different. I went on the net. Over the past 1 year I've been reading a little bit of mythology, quite a bit of mythology, and finding a sense of pride within it. And I was reading quantum physics some time back. And I went on your site and went into your research on indianscience.org and downloaded all the papers. In the last 3 days I've read most of them. In 1 hour today, what I've learned about various religions, I didn't know in 38 years of my life. So great work. I'm sure this book will be an eye-opener for many of us, youngsters or not so young. And I truly wish, as you said, someone should teach it. Because the sense of pride, you mentioned somewhere in your blogs that India is open to embracing the West, but it has to first learn to embrace itself.
Yeah. That's a very good comment. Thank you very much for that. My feeling is that I'm trying to encourage people to, understand our civilization, create a sense of unity in diversity amongst ourselves, and be world citizens, very proud world citizens, always respecting others, but demanding respect for ourselves. I call this mutual respect, which means I respect you, but I want you to respect me also. I am not imposing on you that you are inferior, you should be like me, and I don't want you to do that to me. It's a level playing field. I mean, that's pretty fair. We got to teach it to our kids. You know, idea is I want to get into academics, I want to get into spiritual groups, and the idea is to educate corporate leaders how to project our civilization in their dealings around the world. You see, the East India Company started the study of Indology in Europe, not because they loved us, not because it was fun, but because studying somebody gives you power over them. If I study you and map you in my framework, and in fact I even convince you that you should think of yourself the way I'm thinking of you, I get a lot of power over you. So this is the only way to reverse it, is that we have to do it in reverse. That's the problem. That's the challenge. Now I live in the US, and I must say I'm very disappointed in my other fellow diaspora people who are making huge amount of money, many times what I'm making, but they're living a good life. They have no sense of, a higher cause than just accumulating, which to me is so boring, such a boring life after a while. And they are also mixed up on, are we here, are we there, and all of that. So they're not fully accepted as whites. If you ever think that Western universalism, being digested into Western universalism is a great idea, then you have to look at the fact that the diaspora people who are even billionaires still have this Indian identity out of necessity, because they're still going to be second class. I mean, Harvard will take Tata's $50 million donation and put it on their building and give him honor. People are trying as hell with all their money to kind of buy their way in or become honorary whites, but at the end of the day, you're going to be second class because they know that system, they know their system better, and you're going to be resident there. So we have to do like the Chinese do. The Chinese are claiming an alternative pole in world power, not under the West, not beholding to the West under their umbrella in Western universalism, but creating their own. And Japanese showed this long ago that we can be modern, technocrats, world class, but remain Japanese, and Japanese never give up that sense of who they are. You can also be vulnerable. If you are very self-organized, but an army comes that is highly centrally organized, and they'll take orders, commands from a central authority, and they'll do it, and you guys will debate and discuss and do purva paksha and argue and all that, you may be a more creative lot, you may be a more evolved lot, your art will be superior, dance, music, and all that will be superior, but those guys, as far as brute force is concerned, may actually come and beat you. So I think we have several problems. One of the problems historically over the last 1,000 years is invader after invader came. We did not do purva paksha on them to figure out who are they, why are they here, what's their mindset. Let's send scholars to Makkah and Iran and Turkey and come back with social sciences and philosophy and comparative thought and tell us what's their mindset like. We should have been educating our people about them like they were learning from us, learning about us. And even when the Europeans came, we never sent our scientists to figure out in France and Germany and England what are they all like and come and teach us in our centers of learning. So the Chinese, on the other hand, the Chinese were always translating European thought into Mandarin. This is very interesting, you should know that. When Hegel would produce something, within 10 years, the Chinese emperor would have it translated into Mandarin, make sure all the Chinese thinkers know this is the European thought. When Voltaire was writing stuff, Mandarin editions were available. We did not translate European thought, Islamic thought, to study it as the other. They translated us into their framework. We were very happy to even help them. Our Pandits actually helped them translate. But we didn't gaze at them because it was either arrogance, we thought we were too superior, we thought we were not vulnerable. So we just never bothered to study what their mindset is and what they're all about, what is their intentions. This is the problem. So I'm trying to introduce a new genre of learning among our thinkers and leaders, which I call reversing the gaze. Reverse the gaze on our own terms, study them.
All our culture has been recorded, is in our literature, and our people are not familiar with this literature. So how do we take these notions into public, into general masses?
So, you know, you're pointing out the faults, the deficiency in our education system. And it's a very, very serious problem that we kind of adopted a self-hate education system and did not learn that other countries are not doing that to themselves. They are really teaching their youth all these good things. And I am not a politician. I do not know what I can do. All I can do is keep writing books, and if there's enough people reading them, enough people writing about them, I'd like you to join my discussion group. I need more voices. You know, I want to create a sort of a thought revolution which makes these kind of points so that people do listen, and people will listen when there's enough people raising hell. Media is also not promoting something like this. If I were to write a book which is kind of critical of our civilization and talking about all kind of issues, I would get many more publishers, many more media. NDTV would interview me, they would promote me, all kind of things would happen. I'm telling you that. There's a serious mental block, and this kind of work is very hard work intellectually, it's very hard work politically to stick your neck out, it's risky, you get threats, you are boycotted and put on the margins and become an untouchable, that you know this guy is bad, dangerous, God knows what he's up to. This is a very thankless job, and it can only be done if you really don't care what they're saying, and this is your calling in life, and you want to do it. That's the only way you can keep going. So I hope that others will be there in some quantity to join in this sort of an effort. But it's a very long-term effort, and the alternative is we'll be finished and digested, so we can't give up here.